Hello and welcome to the Passenger Seat Podcast, a podcast designed to fill your passenger seat with chat about classic cars, all recorded from my 1968 Morris Minor Peggy. I'm Becca and today I'm on my way home from work. The weather is massively more overcast than it was at the weekend, so hopefully getting this all recorded before it gets too dark on the way home. My quirk of classic car ownership for you today is how the classic car scene can be an interesting mix of extremely welcoming to lots of variety and things like that, but also can be a quite daunting and exclusive place. And it fits quite nicely with today's topic about International Women's Day and my experience as a woman in the classic car scene, and my time in the last kind of 2 years as I guess I've viewed the last 2 years as my first 2 years as a solo attendee at classic car events. Yes, I have gone along with my partner or friends and things like that, but it's not been me kind of attending as somebody as part of my family or anything like that, so it's been quite a different experience as well. Like I said, I'm going to be covering in today's podcast my experiences really in the 2 years of owning Peggy. I've been attending car shows since I was born basically, and as I've mentioned before, I even came home from hospital in a classic car when I was born, so I've certainly grown up around them and experienced a lot of the classic car scene as I've been growing up, and whilst those years have been really interesting to me and I've got lots of interesting stories from them, in the last 2 years I've definitely noticed a difference as I've gone along as a driver myself. I've been going to shows where people haven't necessarily known me my entire life and started to get to know some more people kind of in that way. So I'm going to be covering kind of two areas today: my experiences as a classic car owner at events and things like that, and then also my experiences sharing online about my classic car ownership experience, both here on YouTube and Spotify, but also over on my Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. So, starting with my time spent at events in the past few years, I've been really lucky that generally everyone's been really welcoming and lovely at most of the events that I've been to. I've had the opportunity to engage with lots of people from lots of different walks of life and had some really interesting conversations with them about their cars, about their experiences, and sharing kind of tips and tricks of lots of different events that they've been to, and also maintaining the cars. And I've been really fortunate that I've now, because of being so welcomed at these events, been able to build up quite a good network of people who I are happy to message and get in contact with about any issues that I have, but also to find out about events coming up and share events that I know about. So it's been really lovely and welcoming in that regard. There has been the occasional situation where it's been difficult to tell whether a comment has been made because I'm a woman or because I'm a young woman, especially because I know that there can be some feelings towards both women and young people within the classic car scene. But I think primarily it's been quite good. The biggest notable thing that I've noticed is that despite me getting out of the driver's seat at events and things like that, and Peggy being, I would say, quite clearly decorated in a way that a female driver might, it tends to be that a lot of people will come up and talk to Jamie at events and ask him questions about the engine and about the kind of running gear and some of the differences that they've noted on the little bit of information that I put up with Peggy at events. And that's always really surprised me, because if they've read that piece of information, they clearly know that the car belongs to me, and yet have kind of decided that it must be Jamie, my partner, who knows more about it than me. And actually, whilst he tries his best, and he's learnt a lot in the 2 years that we've been going to shows together, he still sends me a message sometimes and says, somebody's asked me this question and I don't know what it is, so can you tell me what it is for reference for next time, on the odd occasion where he's been on his own and answered those questions. But there's been times where we've had the bonnet up, been both there, and things have been directly targeted at Jamie. And it's been quite interesting, because I've spoken to lots of people who go to these shows as girls alone, and they've not had that. They've had very different experiences of being treated slightly differently. But because Jamie tends to come with me to a lot of these events, because he's got a growing interest in the cars as well, it's been interesting to see that a lot of questions have been directed at him over myself. While I've been able to use it to my advantage a little bit, in the fact that if people are holding these sorts of prejudices and opinions, they're perhaps not the nicest people to be talking to at these sorts of events. It's also been kind of a bit disappointing that I've lost out on that opportunity to talk to them and share my enthusiasm for cars and for Peggy, but also perhaps change their perspectives on what a girl in the automotive circles can be like, if they've got those kind of assumptions and prejudices in their minds. I am hugely grateful though that at some of my very first events last year, I was very quickly approached by other young female owners at these shows who kind of spotted me and kind of came over and made sure that I felt quite welcome. And it's been great to kind of develop this network of other young female owners who invite me to things, let me know about things, and are also always there to kind of talk to. It reminds me a little bit of some of the stuff that I see happening in the cosplay community, in terms of setting up a safe space for women at these sorts of events that can be quite male dominated. And it's something that I've been really pleased has happened to me, and I'm hoping that going forward I'll be able to kind of carry on offering that sort of thing to anybody new coming into the scene, be they male or female. I'm hoping that by using this platform, I've got this kind of space that people somewhat recognise me and feel comfortable coming up and saying hello if they're at an event for the first time, or even the 31st time, and just need someone to speak to or say something to, or avoid a situation that they're feeling a little bit awkward about. But overall, going to events has been a really fantastic experience, and it is definitely one of my favourite things about owning a classic car, is having that opportunity to go and meet those like-minded people and talk to them about my car. And I'm really glad that generally I've had an absolutely excellent experience, especially given some of the horror stories that I have heard. Online, I've been really lucky as well that I've been able to create quite a lovely community here on YouTube and on Spotify, and through my Instagram primarily. I've recently joined Twitter and Facebook to kind of share some of the stuff that I do with the podcast, and again been generally welcomed with quite open arms and a lot of lovely supportive comments, which I'm really, really thankful for. There has been the odd comment and things like that that's been made, and alternatively a little bit of mansplaining sometimes. I think it's been quite unusual that I think some people are surprised at how much I know. I don't claim to know a lot, but I know enough to just about keep Peggy going on a daily basis. And so when people ask if I do some things myself, and I respond that I do, it does surprise them a little bit, which is a bit of a shame. But it's also been good that they've been surprised when I've been able to offer advice and things that I've learned, and it's been generally quite a positive response, that they've been able to learn something from my own experiences. I do feel quite a lot of pressure to make sure that what I'm saying and what I'm doing is 100% accurate, because I feel like as a woman talking and doing kind of things within this area, people are a little bit more keen to jump on you when there's inaccuracies and when things don't go entirely to plan, or when you slip up on something. And I feel like I'm having to work a little bit harder to make sure that everything that I'm saying is as accurate as I can be, and trying to cover my back and things if I say something that might change in the future. And it wasn't something that I'd really thought about before, but I listened to a really interesting podcast done by Driven Chat with Becky Evans, where she spoke about how sometimes people jumped on her for mistakes that if a male counterpart had made would have gone under the radar. And it's definitely something that I really relate to in terms of the expectation to do well and to do things right, to make a good example, when in reality we're all starting off on the same space when we're kind of making a bit of content about cars, and we're all learning every day. But much like online, it's generally been really nice to make a community for everyone, and have people reach out to me and tell me that they've enjoyed a video, or that they've found me through the videos, and that's helped give them confidence to drive their partner's car perhaps, or to try out something that they hadn't done before. And that's really rewarding, because that's what I really hope to do with my channel, was to encourage more young people, and especially more young women, to make use of their cars and to feel more confident in using them. So if you've ever done that, thank you ever so much, and I hope to see more people like that in the future. Another section that I hadn't really thought about talking about, but has kind of come to me whilst recording, is this idea that obviously using Peggy daily, I come into contact with, I guess, the general public a little bit more, and their kind of reaction to me at petrol pumps and in the garages and things like that has been quite an interesting one. In terms of people stopping and talking to my car, to me about my car, there's an interesting kind of difference in that sometimes when I'm on my own, I tend to get stopped more than if I've got somebody else in the car with me, for people to come and talk to me about my car. And that's, I guess, perhaps because they feel like I'm a little bit more approachable if I've not got other people with me. But also, I wonder if some of it is sometimes surprise that I've got out of the driving seat. I don't think too much into it, but I do find that I am asked questions at the petrol station, in the Tesco's car park, or wherever it might be, a lot more when I'm on my own than if I've got somebody with me. And I'm complimented on the car and things like that a lot more than if I've got somebody with me. So I don't know if it's just because they're perhaps nervous when somebody else is with me, that they're going to assume that the wrong person owns the car, or if they just find it a bit more approachable when I'm on my own. But it's generally been nice. I've never had any kind of bad interactions with people, and I've actually had some really lovely conversations. Obviously you get a lot of the conversations that are, oh, my so-and-so used to own one of those, when I'm out in Peggy. But just the other week when I was recording the podcast in the A40, and I stopped to take some photos and things like that, and some of the outside footage of the car that I used in the video, I had someone come up to me and ask, who was an older gentleman, who kind of asked me some questions about what one was, because he hadn't seen one before and he didn't recognise it. And we had a really lovely conversation, and he was really kind of receptive to the idea that I could help him understand a bit more about the car, and I showed him some of the bits about it, and it was a really interesting conversation. And I was able to kind of talk to him about my Morris Minor, which was a car that he'd actually recognised a little bit more than the Farina, and it was a really interesting kind of experience that was me informing someone a little bit more about the car, because it wasn't a car that they were necessarily familiar with compared to the Morris Minor. So like I said, I've generally had a wonderful time being a female classic car owner, and it's generally been a really good time for the past 2 years, and I'm really looking forward to my future driving cars like this for as long as we possibly can. Going forward, I'm really hoping that I'll be able to fulfill the role of a lot of women within my own life, of helping people kind of feel comfortable and inspired to use their cars. I earlier in the podcast's life, way back in series 1, did an episode about inspiring women, and I'll put a link to it in the YouTube video if you're watching that way and you've not seen it. And I spoke about not only kind of inspiring women in terms of women who had kind of been famous for their roles within automotive, but I also spoke about kind of some women and things that I'd found on Instagram who had been really lovely and really helpful and things like that, or had played a role in my kind of confidence in purchasing Peggy. But prior to that, I think there's also been a lot of women who have been doing and chipping away at this male-centered space for years and years and years. People like my own mum, who were going along to shows for years before like internet and Instagram and things like that, and playing their part in asking to have a go in other people's cars, having a go at gymkhanas, being navigators and things like that. I think there's a long-held stereotype of women either staying at home and rolling their eyes as the men go out in their cars for the weekend, or not being that interested when they go to events, when actually I've been really fortunate that a lot of the shows that I went to growing up, there were some really interested women who were really engaged, wanted to buy their own cars, and as soon as they had the opportunity chose to, or were really engaged and taking part in, like I said, gymkhanas, navigation events, driving events within their local clubs, and perhaps even ending up on the committee of some of these events. Because without like a lot of female committee members on a lot of these clubs, the clubs would not be running in the way that they have been for years and years and years, and not have had the longevity that a lot of them have. So I'd like to wrap up this podcast really pointing you to go and watch that other episode about the inspiring women within the automotive, by thanking all of the women who have been attending shows and doing their part to make it so easy, because I'm really fortunate that my experience has been really quite a good one in my time so far, and I'm hoping that we can all kind of work together to continue to make that the sort of space that a lot of people would like to take part in. So thank you ever so much for listening to today's podcast. I hope it's been interesting and you've enjoyed my kind of little reflection on my experiences. I'd love to hear about some of your experiences if you're a woman who has been kind of in the classic car scene for either a short period or a really long period. Because it's been it's really great to meet new people like that. But thank you very much. Drive safely and happy motoring.